Hello, my name is Mark Humphries and I teach ancient history at Swansea University. What I want to do in this brief presentation is talk about the subject of Roman emperors. Much study of ancient history tends to focus on individuals like Roman emperors, major political figures. And this might seem an odd thing to do when much of what we do in the modern approach to history stresses instead things like social history, history of gender, and things like that. So you might want to ask the question, do Roman emperors really matter? And in this very short presentation, I'm going to provide you with some evidence which shows that from the perspective of ancient writers, Roman emperors mattered a great deal. I'm going to do this by focusing on the example of just one Roman emperor, an emperor from the late 2nd century, the Emperor Commodus, the son of Marcus Aurelius. Now, Commodus has a reputation as a capricious tyrant. He was very full of himself. He was cruel, and he thought of himself as having certain divine characteristics. And one reflection of this can be seen in this image, which is a sculpture that shows Commodus with the attributes of Heracles. You can see him with the club in one hand and with the lion skin over his head. Now, this association between Commodus and Heracles is one that we find mentioned in ancient sources. We also find it on Commodus's coins. So this is not an isolated example. This is, in fact, a fairly typical representation of Commodus. Now, one of the reasons I'm focusing on Commodus is that a popular image of Commodus has come down to us, which was reflected in a film produced in the year 2000, a film called Gladiator. And in Gladiator, Commodus, you'll notice that he doesn't have a beard like the sculpture that we just looked at. In this film, Commodus was played by the actor Joaquin Phoenix, and one of the climactic scenes in the film shows him fighting against the hero, fighting as a gladiator. And I remember when this film came out, there was an awful lot of talk about whether a Roman emperor could fight as a gladiator. And in fact, we have plenty of evidence to suggest that not only did Commodus fight as a gladiator, but actually it was central to the way that his contemporaries perceived him. Now, we have a directly contemporary source for Commodus in the form of the Greek historian Cassius Dio. He came from Bithynia, which is in Asia Minor, that is what is now Turkey. And although he was by origin a Greek, and he certainly wrote in Greek, he was integrated into the elite of the Roman Empire, and he was granted the status of a senator, something actually his father had been a senator too, and Cassius Dio was a senator at Rome in the late 2nd and early 3rd centuries CE. One of the reasons we know so much about Cassius Dio was that he wrote a history of Rome in his native Greek language, and it was a history of Rome from its earliest times down to his own day. So he tells us quite a lot about what was happening in the late 2nd and early 3rd centuries. And one of the things that he tells us about is Commodus fighting as a gladiator in the Colosseum because Dio was an eyewitness to those antics by the emperor. And so far as Dio was concerned, Commodus fighting in the Colosseum as a gladiator said a lot about the nature of Commodus himself, but also about the nature of Rome in Commodus's time. So here is an indication of the sort of ecological terror that was wrought by Commodus when he was fighting as a gladiator. Here we have Dio describing some of the things that Commodus got up to. And it's quite a negative portrait. We're told that on the first day of a series of games, he killed 100 bears all by himself. But he didn't confront the bears, rather he shot at them from an elevated platform overlooking the arena of the Colosseum. We're told that on other days he descended into the arena from his seat and cut down all the domestic animals that approached him. And some that were also led up to him were brought before him in nets. And among the animals he killed were a tiger, a hippopotamus, and an elephant. And we're told that having performed these exploits, he would retire, but later, after lunch, he would fight as a gladiator. So clear evidence of Commodus fighting in the arena, but also notice that it emphasizes that he's not brave, he's not a great warrior, he's a coward who has animals led up to him in nets, who fires arrows at them, or javelins at them, from an elevated position. So this portrait of Commodus fighting in the arena is, so far as Cassius Dio is concerned, one that is designed to present the emperor in a bad light. And one aspect of this negative portrait of Commodus as a gladiator is that it enabled Dio to present Commodus as a tyrant who threatened people like Dio, members of the Roman political elite, members of the Senate. And here we have a very clear indication that Dio is writing about this from memory. He says, "Here's another thing that Commodus did to us senators that gave us every reason to contemplate our deaths. Having killed an ostrich and cut off its head, he came up to where we were sitting, holding its head in his left hand, and in his right hand raising aloft his bloody sword. Although he didn't speak a word, he wagged his head with a grin, indicating that he would treat us in the same way. So Commodus has come up to Cassius Dio and his fellow senators and is threatening to kill them in the same way that he has just killed this ostrich." Now, at this point, Dio provides an extraordinary reminiscence, an extraordinary memory of what happened at that very point, because rather than quake in their boots, Dio and his fellow senators were overcome by the urge to laugh at this comical tyrant before them. He says many of us would have perished by the sword on the spot for laughing at him, because it was laughter that overcame us, not indignation. So how did they avoid execution? Well, it's because of an enterprising bit of quick thinking by Dio. He says, "I chewed some leaves that I took from my garland, and I persuaded the others sitting near me to do likewise. So then, in the steady movement of our jaws, we might conceal the fact that we were laughing." So here we have a really vivid account of Commodus as a gladiator. As I've said, it emphasizes that he is regarded as a pretty poor emperor, and Commodus's antics as a gladiator sum up the tyrannical behavior of this emperor. He's an unworthy emperor. But as you'll see here, Dio is not just disgusted by him, but is actually almost prompted to laugh at him. Now, we're told also by Dio in his Roman history that this spectacle went on for about 2 weeks. And we're also told that, again, in a reflection of Commodus as a tyrant, that members of the Roman elite, that is senators and members of the equestrian order, were compelled to attend. But Dio reflects that one individual decided not to show up, and that was a very elderly senator called Claudius Pompeianus, who we're told never appeared, but sent his sons while remaining away himself. And that's because Claudius Pompeianus was absolutely outraged and disgusted at the behavior of Commodus, not just his tyranny, but also his conduct in the arena. He regarded this as completely unbecoming of an emperor, And furthermore, he regarded it as utterly disgraceful when it was set beside the behavior of Commodus's father, the Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Dio tells us that Claudius Pompeianus preferred even to be killed for staying away rather than behold the emperor, the son of Marcus Aurelius, conducting himself in such a fashion. So there's a clear indication here that such behavior is unbecoming of an emperor, and furthermore, that it contrasts with the behavior of somebody who was a respectable Roman emperor, specifically in this case, Commodus's father, the Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Now, this all leads me to explain why Commodus fighting as a gladiator is described in so much detail by Cassius Dio in his Roman history. This tells us not only about the moral failings of Commodus, it tells us not only about Commodus as a cowardly and comical and capricious emperor, but so far as Dio is concerned, this also reflects on the general condition of Rome in Commodus's reign, because the shift from Marcus Aurelius, a respectable emperor, to Commodus, a tyrannical one, is seen as representing a marked change in Roman history, and that change is reflected in the character of the emperors. When, at the end of his account of the reign of Commodus's father, Marcus Aurelius, Dio offers his verdict on Marcus Aurelius, he says that just one thing prevented Marcus Aurelius from being completely happy, namely that after rearing and educating his son Commodus in the best possible way, Commodus turned out to be a massive disappointment. And Dio says that this reflected a shift in the character of Roman history, because Rome's history now descends from a kingdom of gold to one of iron and rust, as affairs did for the Romans of that day. So Commodus's behavior as a gladiator, Commodus's rather comical appearance, is reported by Cassius Dio because, so far as individuals like Cassius Dio, historians and members of the elite at that time were concerned, the character of the empire was summed up by the character of the emperor. And from that perspective, and from the perspective of the writings that we have surviving from the ancient world, emperors matter a great deal. And these are the sorts of topics that you can explore in more detail if you study with us at Swansea University.